Hey crafty friends, welcome back. We are working on Fergus the Gnome, and this is floss tube number 4, and we're going to do his body. So we've got his little body. There's a little 3D section at the bottom. We're also going to be sewing on his beard, and we're going to be adding his little nose, because gnomes have awesome little noses. It also holds their hat up. Okay? So we're working on this set of dies today. You're going to need 2 of these. There's a little tab that tells you that. You're going to need 1 of these for the bottom, 1 of each of these for the beard, and 1 of those for his little nose. And the DMC cotton I'm using is 828. There's a white, and then there's a 677 to go for his nose. Okay, there's a couple additional things that we need because we're going to be stuffing this little guy. And we also want him to have a nice heavy little bum so that he stands up straight. How we're going to accomplish that? The top part is filled with batting. So I got this on Amazon. And this is basically polyfill. I got this at Michael's. It's a little bit softer than polyfill. And I like it a little bit more, but hey, use what you have. The other thing you're going to need is lizard litter. This is smashed up walnuts. You can get it at Amazon. You can also get it at your pet store. If you have a friend who has a lizard, they probably have a huge bag of it. This is nice and heavy, and it fits in really well in the bottom of little Fergus on his little bum. And I'm going to walk you through stitching all of this, and then we're going to fill him up. Okay, so we're going to start with these 2 pieces, and we are going to sew them all the way around, and then we're going to sew the bottom in about halfway, and then we're going to stuff him, and then we are going to come back and finish him off. So again, oh, and one thing. In a couple of my gnomes in the intro, you'll notice that I showed you that I embroidered across the front so that it showed underneath his little coat. This is the stage that you want to do that. And so what I did was I just took a pencil and I drew a wavy line, and then I did a stem stitch and then added some leaves back in, and then I did French knots in the opposite colors. So this is a darker blue, then I use a darker blue on this one. Or I'm going to decorate this one in all different colored flowers, so I could do a variety of colors. Anyway, do it ahead of time. Otherwise, it's really hard to do afterwards. So again, what you're going to do is you're going to line up all your little holes, and you should be able to see daylight through them. I'm going to be starting down here in this bottom corner. So I'm just going to add some of these binder clips. And this is just going to keep everything straight for me so I don't accidentally get into, like a hole above or a hole below and mess this up. Again, I'm using a very long piece of thread, probably, I don't know, 1 meter, 36 inches, because we have to go all the way down and around and then all the way back. And then I usually start a fresh thread here to make sure that it's long enough to go all the way around, because there's so much going on when you do this bottom part that you don't want to be worrying about thread or tying off knots. Okay, so once again, we need to hide our thread. I have a tail in mind, and I'm going to come up in the middle into the second hole, and I'm going to leave quite a long tail because I'm going to tie a knot, and the knot is going to be buried on the inside of Fergus once we put the bottom together. So not to worry about that. Okay, and when we come back around, we will do the last stitch in the bottom. So once again, just like for the other 2 pieces, we are going to go in and out and get into, I had some resistance there. What's going on? Oh, I didn't pop the foam up from the hole. Okay, there we go. On our way. We're going to go up and down every second one. And again, keeping it taut, but not pulling it so hard that you're going to, number 1, pucker it. Number 2, tear the felt. Spellbinders felt is fairly sturdy. It's nice and thick, and it's got lots of wool in it, but if you pull too hard, it is going to tear. And in particular on this piece, because we're going to be stuffing it, we don't want any weak spots. Once we get all this stitching done, it will be pretty strong, but we don't want to tear it while we're getting there. Okay, so keep your stitches, you're pulling up and down. Try and not pull sideways. I'll move over to the center just a little bit. I'm trying to get into the light here. The light's being funky today. There's a big, huge cloud outside. I think it's going to pour and thunder here pretty quick. So I'm trying to get through this video before it does all that. Okay, so speeding this up and down, and I'm just going to keep on going until I get to the other end. Okay, so I've gone all the way around, and I'm over here now. This is my tail where I started, and I've gone all the way down to the very, very bottom stitch. You want to make sure that you take that in. We need to overlap these stitches to make sure that this stays nice and strong, because when we start stuffing this and sewing it back together, we put a lot of pressure on these corner joints before we get this all stitched up. So we want to make sure that we've got lots of thread going through those pieces. So now you're just going to simply turn around, and you're going to come back and you're going to fill in each of these holes that you missed on your way the first way, and just continue back. And like I said for the other ones, I like to stay, I'm just going to stretch my thread out here. I like to stay on the inside of the holes all the way along, and try and not split your stitches, and then you'll get a nice even stitch line just like that. Okay, I'll be back when I finish this. Okay, so I've come back down and I have that one last stitch at the bottom, so I'm going to go through that hole because I need to finish off the bottom, and that means that I'm going to open this a little bit. I need to come up into that second one to finish the hole, and the reason I opened it up is I'm going to go to the center with it, pull it through. Okay, so that finishes the stitch on the back for me. The stitch on the front was already finished when we started, and now I've got the end piece right beside the beginning piece, and it's on the inside, so I can tie it in a knot, and I don't need to worry about burying the knot because it's going to be on the inside once we stuff our little Fergie. Okay, so I'm just going to pop those down inside, and I'm going to change my thread, and then we're going to start this. I changed up my thread. It's about 24 inches long, and again I have a knot in the end of it. Now we're going to work on this piece, and we need to put it inside the body. So you're going to stick it inside, and starting on the sides, you're going to line up the two, let me use my pin here. You're going to line up the two center dots, okay? And you're going to use a clip to hold them in place. And then you're going to go to the other side, and you're going to do exactly the same thing. So line up those two center circles and add a clip. Now that not only holds it in place for you, it holds it open, and it makes it a little bit easier to get a hold of all these little pieces that we're going to be using to work our way around. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start in the corner, we're going to come all the way around, and we're going to go like one stitch past where this is, and then this is going to be the opening that we're going to stuff, and then we will stitch it closed. Okay, so again, we need to start inside, so I'm going to pull this up, and I'm going to come up from the bottom into, I'm trying to hold this so you can see it, into the hole that's right at the very end, and again, leave a tail, okay? And you can poke that tail inside because that's where we will be tying it, no, outside, because that's where we're going to tie it off. Okay, so we've come through the middle, and this is going to be kind of like the hat where you can only, because we're working in a circle and we're not working flat, you're only going to be able to line up one or two of the holes at a time. And so you just kind of got to go slow and make sure that you're not getting your thread snagged on anything, that it's nice and taut, and that you're lining up your holes. And this is a little bit of maybe backwards and forwards, making sure that you are actually going through the holes and that they're evenly spaced. And once you get this side done, the other side gets a lot easier. So, because everything's kind of held in place. Until then, it's just kind of, you're almost lining up every hole. But that's the way it is when you're doing three-dimensional stuff. It'll be worth it. Okay, coming through there. And then lining that guy up. See, after you get a couple done, it gets a little bit faster because you can see the holes. Okay, I'm going back down again. I think I have room to come up to the next one before I move the pin. Nope. Okay. You move that clip out of the way so that I can see where I'm going. Okay, so that's the middle point. So now I need to realign and line up the next one. I'm going to come up in and then line up the next one, back down. Okay. I'm just going to hold this up so you can see what I'm doing. I have a little tiny bit of a pucker here. I pulled it a little bit too much, but this is still kind of a running stitch. So you can go back and just kind of tug on that a tiny little bit and get that pucker out of there. Okay, so I'm on the back side of this. I want to come up to the next one. And then down into the one beside it. And realigning. Okay, coming up on the next one. And then down again. And this is one of the reasons why I like to push all the little holes out of the circles, because especially in this part, you really do need to be able to see through it to line it up. Okay, so missed that one. There we go. And we can take that off because we're not going to be stitching that side for a while. But we're getting down into the corner here. And you want to make sure you grab all of the stitches. Okay, so the one in the corner, you have to go through the stitching that you already have on the sides and then through the center and come up. And then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to line up that corner and go back down to the first stitch on the other side of the seam. And I'm going to do one more stitch. And then we're going to stuff them. Okay. So I've started over here. I have this whole side half done. And I have come one stitch past. So now I have this opening in which to stuff our little guy. I'm going to use the Condo's batting just because I really like it, and it's natural fibers. It's nice and soft, and you want to take a piece out, and then I'm going to I'm going to cut this in half actually. Find that if you pull this apart and use really small pieces, that it stuffs a lot better. And especially for when getting up here, you only need tiny, tiny, tiny little pieces to get in there. Otherwise, if you try sticking this whole thing in there, it's going to get all lumpy and it's actually going to show. So we're going to just start by putting one tiny little bit in there. And I like to use a pencil for this part. I find the eraser on the end of the pencil has a tendency to grab onto the fibers. Now remember, you want to get that up there and nice and firm, but you don't want to push hard enough that you're going to tear any of these stitches, okay? So again, another little ball. We're just tucking that in there. And you're going to continue doing this until he's about half full. So this one, okay, he's stuffed to here, and then the rest of this is the smashed walnut shells. The lizard glitter. I love that name. Makes me giggle. Okay. So I'm pulling a little bit more apart. And we can add a little bit bigger pieces now because we're getting into a larger area. Okay. The other thing you could use is the paper piecing tool. Paper tool. That's what it is. I really got into that when I was about 20. I was paper tooling everything. I remember I did a huge owl. It was so much fun. And paid a small fortune to have it framed. And then a few days later, changed the color decor in my house and gave it to somebody else. That happens. So we go in stages with our crafts, don't we? Okay. A little bit more going in. Making sure it's good and compacted. He's filling out nicely. Wanted just to check and make sure I didn't have any lumps going on. But he's looking good. And I think we'll put this last piece in and see how we're doing. Okay, so I'm about there. Okay, that's done. You need a bowl. You need a spoon. And you need a funnel. And you're going to pop Fergie into the bowl. You're going to put the funnel where you really shouldn't put funnels. And you're going to bring over the walnuts. And we're simply going to take a spoonful and add it to the funnel. Then you want to shake that down in there. Use the funnel to compact it down as you go. And you got to get this right to the brim. You can't really leave a whole bunch of space. Otherwise, you're going to have a big gap in the middle of Fergus's tummy. Okay, so I got about an inch to go. So I'm going to add 2 more spoonfuls and see how we're doing. Shake it out. I'll show you in just a minute. Okay, so this is how far I've gotten, but this isn't full enough yet. Okay, so little like quarter spoons at a time. And I almost fill it in the middle. Okay, and I'm going to use my pencil to punch it down a little bit. Okay, I'm going to put a tiny, tiny little bit more in there. All right. And you can push this over to the stitch side if you want, just to get it a little bit out of the way. And then you want to try and stay, I'm just going to lay this down for half a sec. I like to close this bag so that it doesn't fall over and make a big mess all over the place. I know that because it happened. Okay, so while this is all here, we need to stitch this closed. And some of it is going to escape. There is no escaping that. but we're going to do our best. You know what? I think I got a tiny little bit too much in there. So you got to remember that this bottom piece is actually going to be inside a little bit. So I'm going to take a scoop out of there. I think I have too much. You want to be able to see the holes on the side of this from the inside. Okay, I'm just going to have another look. Yeah, I can see the holes. Okay, so very carefully, we are going to go through, and you're going to have to look because you don't have any more fingers to kind of hold this in place. You got to very slowly work your way around and try and not pull the thread so tight that you tear the felt. You can pull it a little bit tighter when we do the second row, but for this row, we're just kind of closing, and we got to be careful not to tear anything. Okay, and you also got to line up all your holes. So there's lots to pay attention to for this final little stage. So, and then you get to there, and I'm running out of thread, so I need to lengthen my thread a little bit. And back into the next one. And you just work up and down until you slowly get all the way around to the end. And then we're going to turn around and we're going to go right back the other way. Okay, so up there. You might catch a couple in your stitching. Don't worry about it. It kind of all shakes out once you get, once we start going back the other way with the stitches, everything tightens up. Oops. I went over that time instead of through the bottom. My boo-boo. Okay, see what I did? I went over. So I'm retracing my steps. There we go. I'm going to go this way. And then back again. And this way. This came, okay, so this is going to come a little bit loose. You want to gently pull on the thread, okay, just to make sure that you get it back into the corner where it's supposed to be and everything's nice and taut as you work these last couple of stitches. Okay, and trying to get down into the hole. There we go. For this last stitch, I'm going right into the side seam, okay, and then I'm going to come up and I'm going to go through the hole at the very tip of the bottom, that one right there. Okay, so that joins up this, but we still need to go all the way around again, so I'm not going to tie a knot in that yet, but I am going to overstitch into that next hole. Just a sec here. We need to turn around, and it's easier to turn him going back into this hole and back into this one, and we're going to start filling in all the stitches that we missed all the way back around to this thread. Okay, and this will get easier because now it's closed. So half the stitches are done, but I still like to go back and forth looking because it is a little bit difficult still to line the stitches up, and you want to make sure that you are actually going through those holes because this tightens everything up for you. And you can feel the body now. You can feel all the stuffing that's in there. It's nice. Okay. Need to lengthen my thread again. Okay, I don't need the bowl anymore. Okay. And again, just up and down all the way around I'm just going to leave the camera on. You can speed forward if you want, just in case I run into anything I want to tell you. Okay, and you'll see as I'm working my way around that there's a little kind of divot in here, that this actually fits a little bit on the inside of them. And that's why I had to take that last little spoonful out, because it was going to hill. And if it's hilled, he won't sit very well. You need this to be flat. So just keep that in mind when you're stuffing them. Okay. Just working our way all the way around. So the walnut shells are really good when you're making, if you're doing lots of little cross-stitch pillows and things like that. And, you know, you're going to display them in your house, either in your tiered tray or, you know, your bread bowls. Okay, sorry, interrupting to tell you that I have come to this edge again, and I need to go around the side seam into the hole up in the corner here. So right at the point. Okay, I'm on the other side and I'm coming up because I need to finish that stitch to close this corner. So you want to make sure that you grab that, and then I'm going into the next stitch beside it, and then I got to make sure that I'm going through the right place on the other side. There we go. Yep. So the stitch is going to go around the seam, and that's fine. It finishes off nicely and it looks really nice. Okay, so then we're working on finishing the rest of these stitches into this one. And down to that one. Some of the little walnut shells might get into the little holes. Just flick them out with your needle. Oops. As I was saying, I like doing little cross stitches. I really got into little cross stitch, little tiny ones, and I make a lot of them into pillows because you can put them in your tiered trays and your bread bowls, and they look really, really cute. I missed a stitch. I'm going to have to go backwards. And to make them stand up so that they display nicely, everybody started using the walnut shells in the bottom of the pillows, and that's where it kind of came from. And doing 3D stuff, you always want a little bit of extra weight in the bottom to hold things up. And it was just the perfect solution for these kind of things. Polyfill also has some pellets that you could use. I like the walnut shells because they're smaller, they're more compact, and so they look more uniform inside the body. Okay. Almost done. I think we got about 5 stitches left to go. And just take your time, work your way back around. This is kind of the most important step because you don't want him to come unstuffed. So you want to make sure that he's stitched properly and filled properly so that he stands properly. Okay, and I got one last little stitch there. And then the second from last one, I'm going on both sides. And then the last stitch goes into the stitch at the side. So you're right at the corner. And again, it's going to come up to that, into that center hole right in the corner of the bottom. Okay. And we're going to cut our thread. And we're going to tie this off. So the knot ends up overlapping right into the corner, but when you tie the threads and then you cut them off, they're going to be just in the very corner at the inside of Fergie, and you won't ever see them. Okay? And there we go. So you're going to have a little bit of walnut shells kicking around. They are very easy cleanup. I just kind of wipe them to the edge of the table and then into the garbage can. A Swiffer also works really well for picking them up. Okay. We are finished with that stage. Next, we are going to put the nose and beard on. So I'm just going to prepare my needles. Okay, I'm back. We're going to start with his nose, which is this little round circle, and I'm going to use DMC 677 with a knot in it. And what we're going to do is a running stitch around the outside edge of this. You want to be in about, I don't know, 1/8 of or 1/4 of an inch. You got to go in far enough that you can pull on it without it tearing the felt. So about that far. Okay. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer for you. There we go. So you're going to go all the way around with some reasonably long stitches. We're going to be gathering this, and then we're going to stuff it with some of that polyfill stuff. And I like to use polyfill for this one instead of the other stuff that we used to, the natural fiber that we used to stuff the body, because the polyfill, you can squish it down really, really tight, and then it springs back up. And it helps to make his nose really stand out a little bit. Tried the other one, and his nose was kind of flat. Okay, so I'm finished with those, and I'm going to hold my thumb and finger on the inside, and I'm going to gather this up, okay, till it's a little cup. And then we're going to take some of this pulley, and we're going to scrunch it up as much as we can. I think I got too much. It's amazing how little you need for this. Okay, so you're going to scrunch it all up, stuff it in there, hold it in place with your thumb while you again pull your threads as tight as you can. And then we're going to do some stitches, and we're going to go back and forth across this to close this out. And you want to grab all of these puckers because we're trying to even out the puckers. Okay? So you're just going to work your way around the nose, adding these big stitches all the way across. So I'm starting here, and I'm going all the way across to the other side to grab that. And it's going to pull that little pucker in for me. And it's going to make my nose nice and uniform. And so the more you do this, the nicer your nose is going to look. If you only put 4 stitches in, you might end up with kind of a funky nose. More is better. So see how it's starting to turn into a nice little nose? Got a couple of the puckers just showing up. I grabbed that one. Okay. And then I think I will grab this one. How am I doing? I'm kind of liking that. Looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to add a couple of knots because we don't want these to come undone while we're attaching him to the body of Fergus. Okay, so run it through a couple of times. There we go. Now don't cut the thread off. What we are going to do is we're going to get his little beard. And so you want the 2 pieces to be this way. And so you want these pokies to be going in the same direction. And then they're going to overlap each other so that they look like a nice layered beard. And then you're going to take your little gnome, and you're going to kind of have a little look at him and decide. So you want about this much room showing. I think that's probably about 1/2 inch, because we're going to be putting the nose here. And so if we do that, then the hat there needs to be enough of this sticking up so that the hat stays on. That was kind of the object. And I've since added a pin to the hat, so, it's not a terrible idea. But about 1/2 inch is a good place to start. And then we're going to use some white DMC thread, again with a knot. And I'm going to come in from the back, and I'm going to grab a little bit of the body. Let me just pull this back. A little bit of the body, and then I'm going to come up, and I'm going to go through where the nose is going to cover the beard. Okay? And I'm going to do a small X. So I'm sticking my needle in, and then I'm going in beside, and I'm going through the body for both of these. And you're trying to keep it centered. Okay. And there I have my little X done. So now I'm going to, this is just going to hold it in place because we're going to go through this again with the thread for the nose, and we're going to go through all the pieces as well as grab a little bit of the body again. So this little X stitch is just holding his beard in place so that we can sew his nose on. So it doesn't matter if you leave a little tiny tail because the nose is about to cover it. Okay, so we're ready to go with the nose. I'm going to start by, I'm going to go deep. Okay, so I'm going down to make sure that I get a hold of some of the stuff in his body, and I'm coming back up again. And this needle is still attached to the nose, so I can just pull it through, and the nose is automatically going to follow along. But what you want to do at this point is make sure that the nose is straight on the front of the body. Okay, so you got to kind of manipulate that around a little bit, and then you got to kind of hold the nose with your fingers, and you're going to go back down through the beard and a little bit of the body, and then you want to come up as close as you can to the side of the nose. Okay, that's the second stitch attaching it to the body. So this time we want to go through the nose. So we're going to go through the back of the nose so that we collect that. And again, trying to hold it in the middle of the body. You get a couple of goes at this, and then if he's crooked, he's crooked. You might have to take it off and try again. I've had good success with this though. Okay, so still holding him in place, pulling my thread nice and taut, and I'm using 3 strands again, so this is nice and strong. I can actually yank on it a little bit. I am going to go the other way, okay, just so that we get a nice good grab on the back of this, and I'm coming up again by his nose, and then again I'm going to go long ways through his nose, through the back where those little puckered are. Okay, so now we're coming up the top. So I've got 2 stitches that are going all the way through the beard and the body, and I have 2 stitches going through the nose. And so if I yank on these, yes, they twist a little bit, but they're not going anywhere. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with that. And so what I like to do with this is I like to hold the beard and the nose, well, the beard mostly, in my left hand, and then I'm going to wrap my thread around the nose a couple of times. And that just helps us secure it a little bit more. And then I'm going to run my needle through the nose again. And I'm going to tie off in a knot. So you got to grab this before it gets underneath your nose too much. Okay, there's one. Got to get that good and tight. And then here's the second one. Through the back of the nose and then through the loop. Okay, so there's a double. And then you can just snip it off. So there he is. His little nose is attached to his little body. He now has a beard. And you can put his hat on. And the nose will hold it in place. Isn't he cute? Love him. All finished. So you have all the pieces now. You've got his little coat. You can put that on him. Okay, and if you had stitched some embroidery down there, that little bit would show. And then now you've got his little hat. So here's your finished basis of your little Fergie gnome. And the next video, we are going to play with all the embellishments and we're going to decorate him for the summer. Of course, we have to add his little arms. Okay? Thanks so much for watching. Catch you in the next video where we're going to be playing with flowers.